Всем привет, друзья! Heated Rivalry not only has a sequel book already released, there's going to be an additional sequel book releasing next year in 2027, and a second season of the television series which may or may not be covering a whole array of other books in the broader Game Changers series. Let's do a quick speed run through some lore.
Slash! Good word.
Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve. I'm a film and television critic, and I also love to promote the use of local libraries. I recently returned from being away from my usual setup, but while I was gone, I made sure to stay on top of publishing and outlining some of the new videos for this year. I checked out the remaining books in the Heated Rivalry series through my local library card, which is connected to Hoopla, so I was able to download the books onto my mobile phone and read through them whenever I was sitting on public transportation. If you don't already have a library card, you should get one because they want to help you read books for free. How many corporations nowadays are asking you for money, perhaps at this very moment?
I just upped my price.
What?
Your library isn't doing that. They get their funding simply by you doing things like getting a library card, and even better if you are regularly using them as a resource to check out books. I actually prefer to read books that are physical copies that I can hold in my hands and turn the pages to read through, but when traveling, I only brought one physical library book with me, which was Deep Cuts by Holly Brickley, which also is getting its own source material video that will probably already be published by the time I publish this video. As a reminder of what's been covered thus far, Heated Rivalry Season 1 was primarily an adaptation of the second book in the Game Changer book series, written by author Rachel Reid. As such, the A-plot of this season was the love story between Shane Hollander and Ilya Rozanov, who are professional hockey players on different teams with a public profile as professional rivals within the sport. The B-plot of Season 1 was the A-plot of the first book, Game Changer, which is about the love story between professional hockey player Scott Hunter and a smoothie barista named Kip Grady. In this first season, they got their own bottle episode, which was very cute, and their public announcement of their relationship, which is also Scott's way of coming out to the public at large, is a climactic moment for Scott and Kip's relationship. And this does overlap into Shane and Ilya's relationship, so it was understandable that you would make sure to carve out a certain amount of space into the show's first season to tell that story well enough in order for it to make sense for the audience. Imagine if you hadn't given Kit and Scott their bottle episode, and then Shane and Ilya randomly see some hockey player that we don't know very well kissing his boyfriend on the ice. It still would have been cute, of course, but it wouldn't have had the same level of emotional impact without us having that bottle episode with them. Now, in having read the other books in the series, I can say that although each book is predominantly focusing on another love story involving at least one professional hockey player, there is a fair bit of lore overlap and callbacks to previous books as you make your way through the series. If you watched the show and wanted to read up on the books for the knowledge and research of investigating the lore, perhaps you want to have an idea of what to expect in a show's second season, or perhaps more seasons to come after that, it would make sense to read all of the books as opposed to just skipping ahead to Shane and Ilya's sequel book, which is called The Long Game and is the 6th book in the Game Changer series. I'm not going to give you a detailed plot overview of every single one of these books, but I will offer an abbreviated introduction to what each of these books are so that you have a sense of who the main players are of these other love stories, a general sense of what their relationship arcs look like, and how some of these stories overlap with one another. Picking up at the tail end of the Heated Rivalry book, there were a couple of key details left out of the television series about what Shane and Ilya's plan was for how to navigate the next stages of their relationship. In the book, Shane and Ilya decide that Ilya will move to a different team so that instead of being based all the way away from Shane in Boston, Ilya will instead be on a Canadian team in Ottawa, and as such, he would be closer to Shane. If Ilya moves to the Ottawa team, not only would they be closer to each other, geographically speaking, since they would only be 1 hour apart, it wouldn't be unheard of for them to eventually reveal to the public that they have become friends in real life. Neither of them is out to the public at large as individuals at this point or as a couple, but they decide that they will open a charity together called the Irina Foundation, which will raise money and awareness for organizations that provide support, counseling, and assistance for people who are suffering from depression and other mental illnesses that can lead to suicide. The charity is something that they genuinely want to do because they believe in the cause, but there is also a strategic aspect to this work with their larger plan of being able to eventually be together as a couple without having to work so hard to keep that relationship hidden. This debut of them being friends who are starting a charity together can help the two of them to work on changing the public perception of them, so that if and when they were to announce themselves as a couple, people will have a less heightened, charged perception of the two of them, or at least that's the hope. The epilogue of Heated Rivalry is the press conference of them announcing that they are starting this charity. This takes place 16 months after the final chapter of the book, which is more or less what we saw in the season 1 finale of the Heated Rivalry television series. One of the main questions about how to structure season 2 is how the show will go about combining and overlapping the next couple of books. This doesn't only apply to the books that are specifically focusing on Shane and Ilya's love story, which include The Long Game and the yet-to-be-released Unrivaled. When you read through the books that were released between Heated Rivalry and The Long Game, there are often appearances of characters from past books. It's a bit like the Scott and Kip coming out on the ice moment being shown in the Heated Rivalry book, as well as season 1, but sometimes it's less so a matter of a specific seismic event such as that, as it is Ilya popping up to be in every book as a sort of bisexual Yoda type of character who just shows up, immediately figures out what's going on, and drops some cheeky advice for at least one of the characters in the central romance of that particular book. There have been some stories circulating online about casting for the second season, as well as auditions for the main characters of these books who have not appeared on the show yet. I am not going to go into too many of those reports because I don't want to put too much energy into stories that have yet to be fully verified at the time of me recording this video. It's quite common to not have anything announced until the casting has been finalized, at which point the official posts get shared through the major industry trades and the newer media forms such as social media pages of the show itself, as well as various major talent who work on the show. Let's begin with Tough Guy. Out of all of the books I read in this series, if I have to pick a favorite one, it's this. It's about Ryan Price and Fabian Salah. Ryan is the hockey player, and Fabian is a musician, songwriter, artist, and all-around fabulous person whom Ryan is going to fall in love with. Fabian is Lebanese, and his parents once hosted Ryan back when the pair were high school age. It's some sort of hockey practice that I know little to nothing about. Fabian doesn't like hockey or hockey players, broadly speaking, but Ryan is the notable exception. The two of them had a spark of attraction back in the day. They almost kissed, it was a real moment, but Ryan wasn't out yet. Even in present day, Ryan is quite shy and unassuming. Fabian is the one who is very confident and expressive in his identity and general sense of self. Fabian is also the most androgynous of any of the central leads of these books. He has no qualms about dressing up in feminine outfits with high glam makeup, maybe not every day, but definitely when he's going to perform or feels like dressing up. Fabian will write music, perform live while singing the songs, as well as playing the violin. He is signed to some sort of a small music label, so he's able to release his music and go on tour, but he's not at the level of fame to where he and Ryan are constantly worried about being spotted together and then having to deal with a bunch of media discourse about their relationship. Also, by the time Ryan and Fabian start to reconnect as adults, Ryan isn't in the closet. This is taking place post Scott Hunter kissing Kip on the ice, so it's not as if he has to worry about dealing with the onslaught of attention that comes from being the first to do something such as that. Currently, Ryan is playing for Toronto after having been recently traded there. He has been traded a lot throughout his career from one team to the next, and that has further exacerbated his sense of loneliness and melancholy. He struggles a fair bit with anxiety, and he's very afraid of flying, which proves to be especially difficult because the hockey teams, they regularly fly on private flights to wherever their next game is going to be. Ryan and Fabian's personalities feel more distinct to me in comparison to how the leads come across in the other books. Fabian works part-time in a pharmacy, which is where he has a random run-in with Ryan, and they end up becoming friends, and then they become more than friends.
Come in. Take your pants off.
Ryan's only friend on the Toronto team is a player named Wyatt, who ends up being traded to the same Ottawa team that Ilya joins after he becomes a free agent and wants to be closer to Shane. Some of the other players on Toronto are annoying and mean, and that is putting it mildly. The ringleader of that gang is a player named Dallas Kent, who is extremely homophobic and in a later book revealed to be someone who regularly harms women.
I see you, Milan! I see you!
Dallas's best friend is Troy Barrett, who is secretly closeted and engaging in this nasty bullying behavior because he's hiding. Troy is one of the romantic leads in book 5, Role Model. There's a point where Dallas is saying some homophobic things in the locker room, and Ryan goes up to him and matter-of-factly tells him that he, Ryan, is gay, and Dallas can no longer use that language around him. Ryan's job on the team is to be an enforcer, so whenever things get heated, no pun intended, on the ice, he's the one that needs to fight this or that player. Ryan has this job due in large part to his enormous size, and he does know how to fight, but he doesn't enjoy fighting. It takes an enormous toll on his body and mental health, so his arc is not only about him reconnecting with Fabian and falling in love with him, but also realizing that he needs to quit hockey. He ends up being recruited to help with the Irina Foundation and is able to coach children that come to the hockey camps in order to learn how to play. One of the last things that happens in this book is Ryan accidentally walking in on Shane and Ilya kissing, but of course he's not going to say anything to out them because he himself is gay and he's not a terrible person. In the long game, they actually follow up on that mishap by having Shane pull Ryan aside to speak with him privately, and he ends up asking Ryan if Shane and Ilya could go on a double date with Ryan and Fabian. This is the first time that Shane and Ilya go out as a couple with yet another couple of boyfriends, so it's a really cute milestone that I was happy to discover by the time I reached that book, specifically because Ryan and Fabian are my favorite couple from these books. You have a giant bearded ginger teddy bear with anxiety, and his androgynous artistic Lebanese boyfriend who composes incredible music. Yes, sign me up, let me see it.
Lord have mercy.
Scott and Kip were given their bottle episode in season 1 to give an abbreviated overview of their relationship so that you can have more of that investment in their love story and feel a greater emotional catharsis once they come out together as a couple on the ice. It remains to be seen what the approach will be for these 3 new couples. I wouldn't mind seeing another bottle episode for this or that couple, but that's probably going to depend on a number of variables. How many seasons of Heated Rivalry would they like to do in total? Will they be given more episodes per season to tell these various stories? Season 1 was 6 episodes in total, and episode 3 was Scott and Kip's bottle episode. The timeline of the show was also distinct for how rapidly it was time jumping through several years of secret hookups and gradually blossoming emotional intimacy and romantic overtures between Shane and Ilya. Shane and Ilya's sequel book, The Long Game, doesn't have as much time jumping as Heated Rivalry did. However, we still have the aforementioned time jump of 16 months between the bulk of the Heated Rivalry book and its epilogue, where they announce their joint charity and friendship. If their first double date with a gay couple is going to stay book accurate, we as the audience need to see Fabian and Ryan fall in love and get together, so perhaps Heated Rivalry Season 2 would do well to show more of the in-between of that 16-month period of Ilya moving to another hockey team, and that could be when we see the tough guy love story play out, either as a B-plot or perhaps its own bottle episode. The next book in the series is Common Goal, which is a love story between hockey player Eric Bennett and graduate student Kyle Swift. When their book begins, Kyle is roommates with Maria, whom you might remember from the Heated Rivalry show as being Kip's co-worker at the smoothie shop, who kept going, "Girl," over Kip and Scott having a capital V vibe.
Among other things.
Kyle is also introduced in the story as being hung up on Kip initially, but Kyle isn't trying to do anything about that because it's very obvious how much Kip and Scott are in love with each other, so there's no actual drama that stems from that. At most, he's a bit sad over being hung up on someone who doesn't reciprocate his feelings, but it's not going to do that annoying thing where you have him confess his feelings to Kip at exactly the wrong time for some dramatic blow-up to happen between him and Scott, so if you were worried about that, don't be. Eric is more or less best friends with Scott. They play on the same team, and Eric is the goalkeeper. He's also in his early 40s, but the book and the hockey world at large seem to act as though he's an old man. Eric does decide in this book to have this season be his final one, and he can retire. Eric is also divorced from a woman. He is bi, but doesn't have any real experience being with men. There is a bit of push and pull between Eric and Kyle because of their age difference. Hesitation over whether or not it's a good idea because of that. They initially start to socialize a bit more under the guise of Kyle helping Eric to navigate exploring this other part of himself, of going and trying to look for a man to be with, but they're already attracted to one another, so it really doesn't take much before they simply decide to start hooking up with one another. in a fair bit of denial that it's more than a casual thing. Kyle also has reservations about being with Eric because even though Kyle has a tendency to be attracted to older men, he also had a traumatic experience with an older man when he was younger. When Kyle was just 18 years old, he was working at, it was either a country club or a golf place. It was some place where evil, rich people congregate. But anyway, there was a man working there who was married to a woman, and they had children together. And this man was presumably closeted and absolutely morally repugnant because he seduced a barely legal Kyle. This man's wife had, I think, hired a PI because she suspected her husband was a no-good cheater. Their hooking up was caught on video.
That's gross.
This older man was manipulating Kyle, telling him he was going to leave his wife when clearly that was never going to happen. We hate him. Even though Kyle was a teenager who needed to be supported through this traumatic experience, the scandal was simply too much for Kyle's parents, who instead decided to ship him off to New York City, pay for his apartment, and they're not close at this point. Well, understandable on Kyle's part anyway, because that's not how you support your child. That being said, Eric is a good man. He's never trying to take advantage of Kyle for just some salacious hookups. He genuinely cares for him. Kyle also ends up getting to take over the bar that he works at, the one we see him working and hanging out at on the show. Eric learns that this is a dream of Kyle to run the bar and make it better than it currently is, and Eric can afford to buy it, and now he has nothing but free time in retirement from professional hockey. Kyle appears to be the only lead character from any of these books who has been somewhat introduced in season 1, apart from the leads of books 1 and 2. We do see someone that appears to be Eric in some footage of Scott's team, but we don't really meet him properly. Eric is the one who ends up buying the bar from the current owner to help Kyle fulfill this dream, and it's cute. Being that there's a lot of love among the show's audience for Scott and Kip's bottle episode, as well as their big relationship reveal on the ice, there would presumably be a high demand to also see more of their relationship continue to play out on the show. Adapting the Common Goal book is a great way to do that because Eric finally coming out to Scott as bi is a very sweet, heartfelt moment, probably one of my favorite things about reading this particular book. Also, the end of Common Goal is Scott and Kip's wedding. I would like to see that wedding on the show. Scott also attends and performs in a drag show in this book. Please, let me see François Arnaud in a lace front and a full face of drag makeup. Strut around on stage, put on a show for all of us, please and thank you. We also have a brief but nonetheless noteworthy interaction between Eric and Troy Barrett, the hockey player, as I previously said, who is one of the leads of Book 5. Troy mentions wanting to try to talk to Scott, but is hesitant because he thinks Scott won't want to talk to him. Remember that Troy has been shown as being best friends with Dallas Kent, who is an obnoxious homophobe. Eric is the one who encourages Troy to go ahead and try to talk to Scott because Scott is a really nice guy, and I think they explain in Book 5 that Troy wanted to congratulate Scott on his engagement. The more books you read, the more that the timelines start to blur and the stories increasingly overlap. It's not a straightforward sequential read to learn the larger lore that spans these books. Book 5 is called Role Model, and it mostly begins with Troy being traded to the same Ottawa team that Ilya is on. Also, a reminder that Wyatt Hayes is now on this same team, and Wyatt was the one and only teammate that Ryan was even close to being friends with in Book 3. Tough guy. Wyatt was traded to Ottawa in that book, so now Troy is teammates with him again, since Troy was on that same team as Ryan, Wyatt, and the infamous Dallas Kent. Dallas is accused of rape, and the higher-ups of the hockey industry company, they want to protect him. In that regard, it could be said to be one of the darker books in the series. Troy got into a fight with Dallas where he yelled at him for what he did to these women. I think there's multiple allegations by then. Either way, much later in the book, multiple women decide to team up and file charges against Dallas. Someone filmed the argument between Dallas and Troy, posted it online, it went viral, and the league decided to side with Dallas, so Troy gets traded to Ottawa where he meets his love interest, Harris, who is the team's social media manager. Harris is openly gay. I wouldn't describe him as being as flamboyant as Fabian, but simply by being out and not behaving in any way that indicates shame feels like a shock to Troy. Troy doesn't mind, but as someone who has been highly closeted and fearful for as long as he has, particularly with him having a homophobic father, Troy has been performing toxic masculinity for years just to keep from being found out. All of that to say, being around someone like Harris is a whole new world for Troy. Troy is awkward at first with Harris to enough of an extent that Harris initially believes that Troy doesn't like gay people, but eventually Troy is able to make it clear to Harris that not only is he not homophobic, he is a long-closeted fellow gay who is ready to make important changes in his life. For one, he starts to use social media as a way of advocating for victims, he starts a relationship with Harris, and he eventually comes out to his parents, separately. They're divorced. His mother is now married to a different, better man. She's traveling for most of the book, but shows up for a big game at the end. Troy comes out to her on the phone, and she fully accepts him, as does her new husband. Troy's father, on the other hand, is the worst, and it's more or less a given that he and Troy are never going to have a relationship again, which is for the best for Troy. He was already horrible for Troy's entire life. This is nothing but a good thing to cut off contact. To talk about some of the overlapping timeline aspects of this book, when Troy arrives to join the team, there is a team puppy, and the coach is somewhat new, but he's been working with them for however long before Troy was transferred there. However, in the long game, which is book 6, the book is maybe a quarter or a third way through when you have Ilya mentioning that the Ottawa team is going to get a puppy, that the new coach is incoming as opposed to someone already having been there for however long, and the team is shown to often lose. Whereas in Troy's book, Role Model, you see the Ottawa team have an arc of gradually improving after Troy has been on the team for a bit. Before I fully move on to say some things about the plot of The Long Game, I will note a couple of other details. Harris's family has a business of growing apples and making apple cider from them. It's served in at least one of the bars the characters go to. Apples are a major thing for Harris. Troy often thinks that Harris smells like apples, and on a trip to New York City, Troy visits a gay club with some of the other characters. Specifically, it's the same bar from book 4 that Kyle now runs, the one he used to only be an employee at, but then Eric bought the bar for him. Anyway, Troy gets an apple pin with a rainbow design on it from this bar, and he brings it back as a gift for Harris, which is a really big deal because they're not a couple at this point when Troy does this, and Harris likes to accessorize himself with decorative pins. Also, Harris has a heart condition which has left him with a scar on his chest from being operated on, and it's a thing where Harris wants Troy to not be overly delicate in how he handles him when they're intimate.
Intimate? Is that how old people say sex?
Troy eventually comes out publicly, as in social media, publicly, with the help of Harris, of course. It's Troy's decision, but Harris can help with the process because he's a social media manager. All things considered, the public embraces him, or at least lots of supportive people in the public make themselves known. They come to his first game post-announcement with really nice signs that are supportive, and overall, it's a heartwarming way for Troy's arc to wrap. Moving on to The Long Game, which is the sequel book to Heated Rivalry and the 6th book in this series, there is a significant amount of overlap with Role Model. Chapter 17 is when Troy joins the Ottawa team, and at that point, a fair bit of what you're seeing with Ilya's story includes events and conversations that you have already seen play out in Role Model, but from either Troy or Harris's point of view. However, The Long Game continues further onward past the cute little happily ever after ending of Role Model for that particular central couple. Shane and Ilya's relationship gets accidentally outed to the public. They get engaged and even married, none of which was discussed in Role Model because it hadn't happened yet. Before I go through some of the main plot points of The Long Game, I will offer some early thoughts about how to navigate the larger timeline of these books with their overlapping stories. Of course, this early opinion sharing is subject to change once we get the next book in the series, which is called Unrivaled, and will have Shane and Ilya still serving as the A-plot couple of that story. If you were to make me an executive at the network, I would have some sort of meeting with Jacob Tierney to figure out the budget of the show as it applies to giving them more money, because it has far surpassed the early expectations, so it has more than earned the right to have an increase in budget, but figure out the right balance of things between possibly increasing the episode count of the season, but also making sure to maintain the level of quality of the storytelling. Probably consider increasing to either 8 or 10 episodes, not only because the show is a global hit, but also because you need to accommodate the expanded ensemble. I'm also someone who feels strongly that making shows go on for too long inevitably ruins the series. I would rather have 3 excellent seasons instead of 5 seasons where the first 3 are made well, and then the quality of the story crashes and burns by the time you have the series finale in season 5. Did you ever notice how I never made a dedicated review of The Boys Season 5? It wasn't good, and I don't need to belabor that point by making an entire video about that, because at this point, I'm more than ready to move on. There are also inevitably other variables that come into play when you have a show that explodes in popularity like this. Connor Storrie and Hudson Williams, hopefully, presumably, are going to get an increasing amount of job opportunities. Their schedules will get increasingly busy, they're going to ask for higher rates. Putting aside the topic of Book 7 because we haven't read it yet, mathematically and narratively, I would speculate that a good way to balance the many storylines in Books 3 through 6 would be to have Season 2 of the show cover Books 3 and 4 while also fleshing out some of the material we didn't see in detail for the development of Shane and Ilya's relationship, as well as the continuation of Scott and Kip's relationship that leads to their wedding. As I previously said, Scott and Kip get married at the end of Book 4, Shane and Ilya get married at the end of Book 6, so if you have Heated Rivalry Season 2 cover Books 3 and 4, and Season 3 cover Books 5 and 6, we can end both seasons with a big celebratory occasion of one of the primary couples we got attached to in Season 1 getting married. And then, depending on what's in Book 7, you can presumably end the show with either one last season or even a movie to wrap up the story. Furthermore, I want to encourage all fans of Heated Rivalry to start now with making demands to release the show on physical media. Whenever the show finishes, you want to make sure you get that box set and preserve the art. I'm not going to go on a lengthy explanation of all of the problems with the streaming industry because if I do, I will be talking forever.
One of the lessons is caveat emptor,
as well as the catastrophic loss of art that has happened because of a lack of preservation of said art on physical media, but it is an ongoing issue that spans over a century. Heated Rivalry Season 1 has stayed fairly close to the book canon of Game Changer and Heated Rivalry. There was a direct overlap where a major moment of Scott and Kip's relationship acted as a catalyst for Shane and Ilya to further pursue their romantic relationship. The Long Game, Book 6, heavily overlaps in its timeline with Role Model, Book 5. Troy, one of the romantic leads of Role Model, his character journey is established, albeit only in these much smaller glimpses, in Books 3 and 4. Shane and Ilya, like I said earlier in this video, haven't been shown on the television series making the plan for Ilya to move from Boston to Ottawa once he becomes a free agent so he can be closer to Shane. At least not in the detail that the book goes into. They haven't shown Shane and Ilya deciding to start this charity together, the Irina Foundation, or having the press conference announcement to announce that they're friends now and starting this charity. It makes the most sense to have that be a significant part of Season 2's storyline. One option for where to end this upcoming season, timeline-wise, would be for the allegations against Dallas Kent to become public, he and Troy can have their fight, but then you don't have Troy joining the team until the beginning of Season 3, so then Troy's love story with Harris can be the cute B-plot while Shane and Ilya are working through some of their more serious relationship issues that happen in The Long Game. Let's talk about those now and the overall story of The Long Game. Ilya's storyline in The Long Game places a significant amount of focus on his mental health. He is struggling with feeling lonely and isolated now that he's in a new place, on a new team, and has to keep his relationship with Shane hidden. Shane is based in a location where he has family and friends nearby, so even though he also feels stress from keeping this relationship hidden, he is able to have more of a support system and a life outside of being busy with hockey and a secret boyfriend. What's interesting is that when they were establishing Ilya feeling lonely and isolated, one of the first thoughts I had was, well, he should get a pet. Fast forward however many chapters, and Ilya does end up adopting a dog. After Troy and Harris start dating, they invite Ilya over for dinner at Harris's family house, and they have multiple dogs, including one that was recently found by their neighbors as an abandoned stray. Ilya loves her like he loves all dogs, and once he realizes that this dinner is also a blind date between himself and this dog, Ilya agrees to adopt her, and he names her Anya. Ilya is a wealthy professional hockey player. He can afford to adopt an animal in need, and make sure that she is always properly cared for, even if he has to go away sometimes to play hockey games in other locations. Shane and Ilya do not live together for most of this story, and being busy with professional hockey means that it's challenging for them to find time where they're both free to meet up and spend time together in person. I am all for pro-animal and pro-adoption messaging in more entertainment fiction. I adopted my second cat from a rescue group in Lebanon called Aliar's Pet Club. If you would like to follow them or donate to help them to provide care, they are always one of the donation links that I include in all of my video description boxes. Even if a pet isn't a major storyline in a film or series, I just wish that we could show an animal sitting in the background of where a character is, because I think that even this sort of visibility could help people to consider helping animals more than they currently do. Within the last couple of months, I just rescued a cat I named Kiki. She was outside and she was in heat, and since she didn't run away, she let me pet her and pick her up, so I had no choice. I brought her inside, she got fixed, and we found her a loving forever home. If there's one scathing bit of feedback I have for the long game, it's that they mention Starbucks and McDonald's. Disgusting. We're boycotting Starbucks and McDonald's. I was already boycotting McDonald's and doing so for years, ever since I found out that they have a location on Guantanamo Bay. I absolutely despise how often I'm reading some book that's popular on Book Talk or BookTube, and it's getting adapted. It's probably a romance story set in present day. And then I go to read it and I see that they've inevitably name-dropped some evil corporate place that the characters are going to go to. Do you get more in your book deal if you advertise these companies? Is that why they're constantly in there? If you work in publishing, tell me the tea because I want to know. It's always a jarring interruption to the flow of the story. I despise it. Shane is the first one to bring up Ilya's mental health to him. He gently expresses some concerns about how Ilya is doing emotionally and psychologically, and Ilya insists that he's fine. And Shane reassures him that he will support Ilya either way, regardless of whether or not he seeks help. Sometime after this, Ilya does start going to therapy. He finds a therapist who speaks Russian, so she is able to do his sessions with him in the Russian language. A major villain of this book is Commissioner Roger Crowell. He is a higher-up of the Major League Hockey. If you are reading the books in order, you will have already met him for his antagonistic role in the previous book, Role Model. He tried to passive-aggressively intimidate Troy into no longer posting on his Instagram all of those things about expressing support for victims and raising awareness about the issue, ways to help, and whatnot. He's not a cartoon villain where he's going to say things more directly, yell, make outright threats. He is the type of person who tries to hide his ugliest opinions behind a veneer of passive aggression and professionalism. He's an important character to cast well on the show because you want someone that can perform the material with those layers. The superficial layer of saying one thing, but also making it very clear to the audience, the threats and bigotry that are bubbling under the surface. In the long game, Crowell first makes his weird threats to Shane. There are rumors at this point that Shane is gay. I don't know if it really counts as rumors since Shane by that point is already out to his entire team. It's more than just his boyfriend and parents who know. What they don't know is that he's with Ilya. Crowell doesn't want Shane to be out to the public. He tries to make it an issue of the league's reputation. He doesn't like anything that's disruptive, anything that could cause the public to look into folks in the league and do things like, oh, I don't know, dig up old problematic social media posts that cause a whole new wave of bad publicity for the league. There's definitely an implication that Crowell is all of the things that we don't like. A bigot, a person who doesn't believe victims, but he's usually more careful with his words to try not to say anything that's direct enough to get called out for. The main dramatic escalation happens after Shane and Ilya are accidentally outed. I will explain how that happened later because I'm explaining Crowell's role in this story right now, and I think it's too disruptive if I'm hopping back and forth. Shane and Ilya are accidentally outed as a couple, and Crowell insists on having a meeting with them. They opt not to bring their agent with them, even though she would have gone and accompanied them if they had asked her to. Crowell has a statement prepared that he wants the two of them to release and have them go along with this. The cover story is that they got caught kissing on video and it was just a prank. Yes, really, a prank. It's absurd, but that's what he wants to do. When Shane says that he and Ilya are getting married that summer, Crowell is outraged and tries to forbid them from doing so. Shane says that they will sue if they're kicked out of the league, and Crowell claims that if they sue, their careers will be over because no team would want them after that. And Shane points out that he and Ilya are extremely skilled, high-profile, sought-after players, so the league would be losing out on the benefits of having them on the team if he were to be antagonistic towards them in this way. Crowell doesn't end up kicking them out of the league, but I would interpret the motivation as being more so a matter of not wanting the even bigger media spectacle and fallout from being accused of being bigoted, the potential financial and reputational hit that could follow in that situation. The general consensus among our main characters is that if Crowell could find a way to get rid of queer players from the league, players who are involved with queer activism or advocating for victims, be they Dallas Kent's victims or just victims in general, he would kick them out immediately. He just doesn't have a way of doing that without risking a scandal for doing that. One important detail to note is that Shane says that he recorded the meeting somehow. I don't know if it's just the audio recorder on his phone or if he had a hidden camera on him somewhere. Please don't do an advert for those Meta recording glasses. Do not give good PR to techno-fascist inventions to further escalate the surveillance state that we are currently trapped in.
Sharon Tate was the last to die.
Shane is rich. He can afford a regular sneaky recording device. That or an audio recording will suffice. Let's just pretend that the Heated Rivalry series exists in a world where AI is not a plague running rampant courtesy of techno-fascists. Read Empire of AI by Karen Howe. There you go. That's my book recommendation for the day. I would assume that recording is going to come back in some way in book 7. I want the recording exposed. I want Crowell to be punished the way that evil rich people are never punished in real life, unless the working class effectively organizes to rise up against them.
Death to the enemies of the people of the Republic. Hurrah! Justice is served.
One of the major events in Role Model that's particularly significant for Shane and Ilya is in the long game as well. There is a point where the Ottawa team is on a private flight, one of the ones that professional teams take, either to or from a game. Something goes wrong with this airplane, and it starts to drop. It's incredibly scary for everyone on board. They do not know if they're going to survive until the pilot successfully makes an emergency landing. Everyone survives without any injuries. However, in Troy and Harris's love story, they hold hands on the plane, and it's a really big moment for them because at that point, they've only been yearning. Maybe there's been a light bit of flirting thus far, but then after they survive, they end up getting intimate for the first time.
Stevie, thrust. Thrust, it's funny. Thrust. Oh, I've said it too much now. Thrust.
When you go through that scene in Role Model, Ilya is described as hurriedly typing on his mobile phone. But when you read the scene in the long game, you are actually in Ilya's point of view, so you know for a fact that he is messaging Shane on Instagram, which is something he does whenever he's on a plane without a signal to be able to directly text him. Shortly before this trip, Shane and Ilya had gotten into an argument, but this near-death experience puts things into perspective for both of them. So, when they are reunited for the first time after this, Ilya comes to find that Shane has set up a bunch of candles to create a romantic setting, and Shane proposes marriage to Ilya. Ilya had previously promised to propose to Shane on the dock with a bunch of candles set up, so Shane's presentation during this proposal is a callback to that previous romantic promise. Very romantic indeed. We love to see it. Early on in this book, the relationship tension stems from Ilya feeling lonely and isolated. He struggles with the secrecy in a different way than Shane because he has this mental health storyline, and he's more isolated than Shane is in Canada. Shane is struggling with the secrecy more so from the angle of being worried and afraid about the negativity and backlash that could happen, not as much because they're two men, but because of them being professional rivals in hockey. It doesn't really make much sense to me, a person who doesn't follow sports, hockey or otherwise. I don't care about sports. I don't like sports. The only sports-related thing that I happen to like is Celtic, but that's because of the socio-political history, not because I'm actually following any of their games. I don't think the book is all that good at making the weird fixation on them being rivals make sense to me as a person who is outside of sports culture, particularly when Shane and Ilya have already announced that they're friends in their personal lives and run this charity together at that point in the timeline. To me, that's it. Whatever issue existed is over. Maybe the show will make it make more sense. What's wild is Shane's worries are proven to be extremely justified because most of the people on his team react extremely badly when the relationship is revealed and they turn on him. Not because he had a secret boyfriend, but because Ilya is his professional rival. If you speak sports, please, I welcome you to translate this because I do not follow this language or rhetoric whatsoever. It's not my culture.
I'll never do that again, comrades. I'm a man with a fragile brain.
It's not as if Shane is presented as wrong for running with it once he and Ilya are outed, but his worries were 100% valid. We're all happy for Shane and Ilya to happily be out as a couple, engaged, and eventually get married, but Who cares about professional rivals? Grown men skating with sticks? Who cares? As if that means two of those men can't fall in love and smooch when they're not on the ice? Grow up.
Put your ring back on, honey tits. You haven't had enough porridge this morning to talk like that.
Let's rewind to some of the cuter moments. Shane is still friends with Rose, and at one point she takes him shopping. She buys him some really nice clothes, including a shirt that Ilya really likes seeing Shane wear because of how good he looks in it.
It's fashion meets...
Shane's hair is more grown out in this story, and this is repeatedly brought up. And Ilya finds this longer hair to be very attractive.
The tasteful thickness of it. Oh my God.
There's a point where Shane and Ilya were having one of their secret visits, and they got a call from Hayden, who needed them to babysit the kids because his wife Jackie had an accident. I think it ends up just being a sprained ankle, but either way, he needed to bring Jackie to get medical treatment. And guess who is tasked with babysitting the kids? Shane and Ilya. There is a recurring dimension of the story where Shane and Ilya think about and talk about having children someday. What would that look like? How would they approach parenting? Well, guess what the kids do? They very quickly clock that Shane and Ilya are a couple, and they propose that they hold a pretend wedding for Shane and Ilya. The kids are all right, truly. What a sweet way of introducing the eventual proposal and marriage that happens further on into the story. In one of Ilya's therapy sessions, Ilya's therapist advises him to tell just one person about his relationship with Shane because at this point, Shane has people in his life that know. Shane's parents, Shane's friend Hayden knows because he guessed it a while back. Maybe that's something that will happen in season 2, by the way, Hayden finding out. And it's cute because even though it's a bit of a shock, he is ultimately a good friend to Shane and he supports him. Ilya's in a sort of mental stalemate in his mind where on the one hand, he wants to be public with Shane, but on the other hand, he is dreading it. Telling one person Ilya trusts enough to tell is a way of chipping away at that block he has in his mind, make the situation less intimidating. So who does Ilya tell? Svetlana. They aren't as close in the books as they are on the show, but they do have a good enough relationship in the books to where Ilya decides to get dinner with her and they haven't seen each other in a while. And when he says to her that he's in a secret relationship, at first she is asking questions under the assumption that it's with a woman. But when Ilya keeps saying no, she gets an idea and she asks if it's a man. And she's very supportive, even when she learns that the man in question is Shane Hollander. Svetlana on the show already knows that Ilya is bi, but if she doesn't know that Jane is Shane, it would be cute to get to see Ilya tell her that eventually. I haven't explained yet how their relationship gets exposed, so let me do that now. There is a recurring plot detail of Hayden regularly recording fan mails, which are basically cameos, but without calling them cameos, presumably for legal reasons. You're willing to name drop Starbucks and McDonald's, but you couldn't get the rights to cameo cleared. Weird, but okay.
It makes no damn sense. Compels me, though.
When Shane and Ilya are over at Hayden's house, he is in a rush to get a fan mail recorded because it was promised to be completed within 24 hours, and he now only has maybe about 30 minutes before he goes past that deadline. Being that he's in a rush and has a bad habit of not checking his videos before he sends them to the person that bought them, Hayden, the genius that he is, doesn't notice that in the background of this video he's just recorded, there's a mirror that is angled in such a way that it catches Shane and Ilya kissing. Hayden's customer proceeds to post this fan mail video on Twitter. I think Twitter, yeah. If not that, some sort of social media. And it blows up more or less immediately. Hayden is incredibly apologetic about this, and Shane and Ilya don't blame him. They know that it was an accident, and he's always been very supportive of them and kept their secret. As I said before, Shane's team mostly reacts badly, as does his coach. Even Shane's friend JJ reacts badly, though JJ does come around after a bit. He was mostly upset about the fact that this was being kept secret from him. He feels lied to. He had actually tried to set Shane up with various men before, and he correctly guessed that Shane had feelings for Ilya, but JJ was under the assumption that it was an unrequited crush on a straight man, as Ilya has this reputation for sleeping around with lots of women. It's an accurate portrait of Ilya's behavior, but all of that was from before he got into this committed relationship with Shane. JJ and Shane do eventually make up though, so that's something. It's progress. Ilya's team, on the other hand, is fully supportive of him because They already have Harris as their beloved social media manager, and Harris is openly gay. Troy has already come out to the team as well, both as an individual and the fact that he is dating Harris. A noteworthy reveal, though, is that the team coach, he has a private meeting with Ilya to express support to him and warn him that Crowell wants him and Shane to be benched for a bit. Coach Wiebe is a newbie, so he doesn't have much in the way of power or influence within the larger league, but he reveals something to Ilya that he has never admitted to anyone else except for his wife. Coach Wiebe is bi. And when he was a player, he hooked up with a teammate, caught feelings, told this man that he loved him. The teammate either didn't reciprocate those feelings or he simply wasn't ready to pursue anything. So after that player was traded, the two of them never spoke again. Meaning, this Ottawa team is very queer and we love them. After Shane and Ilya's relationship is exposed, during one of the important games that their teams play against one another, Shane accidentally trips and his team loses. Most of Shane's team, including his coach and the press of that region, are very unkind to Shane about this, and they question or even outright accuse him of intentionally losing the game. Sports-induced brain rot, clearly, considering that Shane and Ilya have been together for years and maintained a highly competitive back and forth for all of that time. Open up the schools, nag the people in your lives to go to the local libraries and start reading more books again, because the anti-intellectualism is running rampant.
Pensive?
Damn, I was going for thoughtful.
Shane is so disturbed by the way that this backlash plays out that at the end of the season, when he's a free agent, he decides he wants to move to a different team. Ottawa is his first choice, and somehow the team is able to find the budget to afford adding him to their roster. Another highlight of the book is when Scott shows up to Ilya's house while Shane is there and offers his solidarity to them. Scott feels really bad that they were outed against their will, as being outed was an enormous fear of Scott's for many years. Scott also tells them that he's been working on putting together a group of hockey players, and this group will fight back against toxic hockey culture, which not only includes homophobia, but racism, sexism, rape culture, transphobia, and toxic masculinity. He's been working on this for a while at this point and has over 50 players who are interested in joining. This means that they can offer support and strengthen numbers instead of having to end up facing the ire of folks like Crowell and others like him on their own. Ilya also tells Scott that he wants them to be friends, as they haven't ever really been friends with each other before that point. I would definitely love to see more of the main characters of these books interacting in seasons 2 and hopefully a season 3, if and when that gets greenlit and released for our viewing pleasure. If I were to do a ranking, as I said before, my first place of these books would be Tough Guy. I really like Ryan and Fabian as characters and as a couple. I think they stand out a lot in a good way compared to other main characters across other books, particularly with how they're written in the books compared to how they're performed on the show. If they announce casting for Ryan and Fabian, please come back to this video and tell me in the comments, because I've divested a lot from social media, mostly out of spite. I might not see a casting announcement if and when it happens. My second favorite book is probably Role Model, because I like that they made me wait longer before Troy and Harris actually got together. I was able to sit in the yearning, experience a little bit more of a slow burn compared to how some of the other stories played out. And it made it feel like it was a satisfying payoff once they finally did open up to one another about their feelings. Let me know your book rankings, your hopes for season 2, or any other adaptations you're looking forward to. If you would like to follow my running commentary about source material books and their adaptations, you are always welcome to look through my book versus movie review playlist. Among other things, we recently went through a bunch of Ali Hazelwood books, and we started going through the Francesca Bridgerton book in an ongoing video series that will be counting down to the release of Bridgerton Season 5. Lots to read and watch, so come back soon to follow along with more of that.